Welcome to the Books and Beer Book Club, coming to you from Cercis Brewing Company in Columbus, Wisconsin. We're a different kind of book club, only reading books by authors who can visit us in person or via Zoom for the discussion. We've been going strong since 2015, meeting nearly every month. We're now making these fun and informative discussions available to you on video. I'm your host, Valerie Beal. I'm an author myself, and I enjoy interviewing our guest authors and facilitating the questions from our readers both in person and on Zoom. We hope you enjoy this replay. To join us live, please check out our schedule on our Facebook page at Books and Beer Columbus.
Welcome back. I love it when we can say welcome back to Peggy Joque Joque.
Misspelled French.
Okay, Joque. Is it misspelled?
It is. It's supposed to be Jacqueus.
Oh, I guess that would if it was Joque. Interesting.
And on my grandparents' wedding certificate, it's spelled both ways.
Oh, well, that's even more fascinating.
Yeah.
Huh. Oh, we may have to talk more about that.
Yes.
So Peggy Joque Williams, who previously was here with her sister-in-law,
Mary Joy Johnson.
Mary Joy Johnson, and they write, if you remember, as M.J. Williams, they write the On the Road RV like mystery series. And we still want that one set in the Apostle Islands, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
It's coming. Maybe
It's in progress. It's in progress. It got stalled by
by important things like
Yes.
this beautiful book. It's a gorgeous book, by the way. I just think it is. So welcome back. And we previously, I guess we would have been back at Black Kettle at the time that you joined us.
Yes.
And I should have looked it up, but we couldn't remember exactly what year it was when we had that
Right.
discussion. So we're in like swankier digs now.
Yeah.
Because we're not in the dive bar anymore.
Oh, well, it was fun there too.
We
It was
liked our
great.
dive bar.
Yes.
It had good meeting space. It worked. It
Yes.
worked very well. I always pop onto authors' websites
Mhm.
as we, prepare for these things. And I wanted you to tell us more about your writing career because you write all kinds of things. You don't just write fiction,
Right.
and you don't just write novels.
Right.
So give us your
Oh,
your
man.
CV.
Yeah. No, I started writing way back in sixth grade. All my friends and I would gather around it. We were going to write the next great Beatles movie after a hard day's night. So that kind of age tells you how old I am. And writing was fun. It was something we sat around and laughed over and had a good time and passed the notebook around and the pen.
So you did community writing gig with everybody.
It was community writing, collaborative writing.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I did all the way through. I am an elementary school teacher, retired now, but I supplemented my income by writing video scripts for a local company. They did educational, industrial, corporate kind of PR and a lot of how-to. Things like how to make cheese balls for Swiss Colony and things like that. Safety in the Campbell soup arena and stuff like that, which is all collaborative in that you're working with the client, you're working with the producers. I met Christine DeSmet, a local writer, and we started writing screenplays together, and we started entering them into competitions. And we won a competition that was running concurrently with the Sundance competition, and they called it Slam Dance. And Sundance was, we went out to Park City, and Sundance was like down at one end of Main Street, and Slam Dance was in a room of a bar with showing the movies on the on sheets and things. But that got us noticed by New Line. New Line picked up our movie and optioned it. It was called Chinaware Fragile, about a woman around 1900s in San Francisco who rescued the Chinese immigrant girls who were brought in to be part of the chattels and the cribs and that kind of thing. It never got made into a movie. It was at the same time that they were doing The Lord of the Rings, and they had decided to produce all three movies at the one right after the other, rather than wait and see if one was going to make it big or not. And so they had all their money plowed into that. And
Wow.
they didn't have enough money to induce a director to go for ours.
Right. But seriously, like legit big company.
It is, it was. And
Yeah.
we got decent money for the
Right.
option. It just
Right.
didn't go beyond that.
Right. And we've learned from a few of the other authors we've had in kind of like how that works and how, you know, you get paid for the options, but you never know what's
Right.
going to really happen.
Right.
And then the options run out and you can resell,
Yeah.
you know, the movies, the scripts and stuff.
Right.
So the script writing is really quite different, or
It's very different.
Yeah.
It's its own kind of beast. And because I co-wrote with Christine,
Mhm.
it was collaborative. And if it gets picked up, so in the theater, if you write a stage play, the writer is God. They don't change a word without the writer's permission. In the movie industry, they will take your idea and rewrite it however they please. They will do with it whatever they want. They will bring on extra writers. They will write the dialogue to fit a particular actor.
Okay.
So you lose control over it that way.
So I'm just curious, did you guys ever try to keep like, you know, your producer credit or anything like that?
So, well, if you're a big name, you can keep producer
Yeah.
credit. If you're doing an independent film, you can have a lot more control.
Sure.
You can be a producer, you can be a director, you can direct your own. And in fact, Christine and I wrote a short film that was produced locally. And that ended up made its premiere a year ago, September. And then it was a private premiere. And then it was in the Door County Film Festival.
Oh, that's so
And it's
fun.
the Stone Cutter.
The stone cutter.
Stone Carver.
The stone
Yeah.
carver.
Yeah.
So that had to feel so good
Mhm.
that the characters you wrote
Yes.
to watch that come to
Oh
life.
my gosh. Yeah.
Did you
Yeah.
cry? I would have cried.
Yeah. At portions of it. Yeah. Yeah. And the actor they chose did an amazing job. And it involves a statue of a mermaid.
Mhm.
And they were gonna try to get a local company that does monuments and
Okay.
things to make them a statue, and that fell through. So they did a very unique thing with with one of the actresses. And you have to look really close to realize she's the stone mermaid. And it's pretty cool.
Oh my gosh, it's so
So,
fun.
yeah.
So when was this? Like, how long ago was this that you guys got to see this actually made, you know, produced?
So we saw the premiere
Mhm.
last September.
Okay, so not really very long ago.
No, it's very recent.
So how long ago did you write the script?
Oh, that probably was a good 5-6 years.
Yeah, isn't it funny how long it takes to bring things? I mean, in books too, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
when did you begin writing Courting the Sun?
Yeah. So this one is Courting the Sun.
It's so pretty. Do you guys just not love the cover? I just think it's the best cover.
And this edition's a little thicker than what most of you have. This is the large print edition.
It's nice to do
came
that.
out. And I have copies available, but it's mostly for libraries because libraries like to have the large print edition. This book I started in about, I want to say 1919. I know it took me a good 3 years to write. And then I found an agent. And that I was very lucky to find an agent. And she loved the book. And she was at the really reputable agency. And she showed it all over. She showed it to all the big 5 companies and their subsidiaries. And they all said, oh, it's wonderful, but we're not buying it.
3 years to write that. Can we have the sequel next year?
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
I'm writing the end scene right now.
Are you really?
I was up late last night. You can ask my hubby.
We all want the sequel.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
right? So
So I ended up going with an independent company.
Mhm.
And from when I signed the contract to, because usually a book will take a good 2 years with a big company. They gave me the publication date 9 months out. So as soon as I can get it to them and get on their calendar, yes, it's almost done.
and they did the cover for you.
They did the cover.
I mean, I really think they knocked it out of the
Yeah.
park. I think the cover is just
Yeah.
gorgeous. So
Their cover artist is David King,
yeah,
and he
nicely done.
just, I didn't request any changes at all. I was just a mess.
You're so much nicer than me. I'm in the middle of my mystery cover and I don't think they'll ever work with me again, actually. I've sent back so many change requests. It's a long story. I'll tell that story some other time. But yeah, I mean, it can be tricky because you want it to be perfect. It's your baby.
Absolutely.
You want it to look exactly the way it ought to look and do justice to the story inside. So.
Well, and I don't think I knew what I wanted.
Mhm.
I told them it was not a bodice ripper. You know, I told them it was not a traditional romance. Told them it was in the court of the Sun King, so there's a lot of gold. And I
Mhm.
sent some of the Sun King symbolism and stuff, which he didn't use, and this is so much better.
Well, I mean, you know, and I mean, the subtitle, you know, being a novel of Versailles, but you get the feel of the hall, you know, with all the light
Right.
coming in and you spend a lot of time, which I love, describing the opulence of their clothing. And I mean, of course, the shoes are important and stuff, but I love that kind of detail in historical fiction. Like I get really excited about knowing what they look like, what they're wearing. And it matters because this is a very, you know, unique like setting in the court of a king, and you've got a very lush environment.
Yeah.
And everyone's expected to, you know, present in a certain way.
Right. And the blue dress was important. And I might have mentioned it in my notes to him.
Mhm.
Or the guy just has wonderful ESP because it was like, oh my gosh, there's a blue dress here. And the blue dress makes a brief appearance in the second book in a wonderful way.
Oh, well, good. Glad to know. Shh, don't give it away. Don't give it away. Okay, so do you read historical fiction?
I do.
And so you've always enjoyed it.
I
Did
do.
you ever anticipate that you were gonna, I mean, you had started with these mysteries.
Mhm.
Did you anticipate that historical fiction was going to be in your future as a
Oh,
writer?
no. Other than the fact that our mysteries have a little bit of history in them.
They do. You do
So,
learn some things in
Yeah.
all of the books. Yep.
and our idea was that we would embed just a little bit of historical background.
Mhm.
But I never thought I'd write a book by myself because everything I had done up to this point was collaborative.
Yeah, I
And-
guess so. Right.
You know, so when I wrote the mystery novels, my forte is dialogue. You know,
Mhm.
writing screenplays is all about dialogue. And I teach workshops on dialogue. And I co-teach workshops with Christine on dialogue. And my sister-in-law, Mary Joy, would create the setting and clothe the people and, you know, that sort of thing. And then it was all of a sudden, oh, wait, now I have to clothe the people and I have to create the setting, and figure out what's going on.
Well, okay, so I'm curious, I can't even imagine the quantity of research you had to do. The details of both like village life, like, you know, more modest village life, and then, you know, moving all the way up into the palace.
Right.
I mean, how much time did it take you to research all of that so you had the details right?
Well, it's really typical for writers, maybe of any fiction, but historical fiction, to write a sentence or two and then spend an hour researching to
Sounds
get
about
the
right.
details right. Yeah, it's a lot of time researching.
Mhm.
But it's what I love about it. It's going into the past and just we're so fortunate to live in an era where we can see samples of the clothes that they wore,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
When I was in France, when Mark and I visited France, I didn't make it to Versailles. He did. He went by himself. And I'm still bugging him to find the pictures from there. But I've been able to tour Versailles virtually
Yes.
by going online and walking through the rooms and seeing what they look like. More generally, they're more like what they were at the time of Louis XVI and
Mhm.
Marie Antoinette. But, you know, a lot of it was much the same early on, at least the opulence of it.
Well, and it's beautiful and the grounds are gorgeous. But yeah, so when we think about, I'm just trying to think back to like when things shifted, like, so vertical files, right? Remember vertical files? You know, who else remembers vertical files? You know, nobody knows what I'm talking about. Wait, you know, like in the library,
Libraries,
like
yeah.
you'd go and
Right.
grab, basically it was like Google. No, there's the thing called vertical files that would house collections of information on a topic. And they were in kind of like what might be considered like a magazine holder. And like, if
Yeah.
you wanted to get, and so then it would depend on the size of the library, like how vast these were or whatever. But like, it was like early Google. But you just think about like trying to amass the information, maybe back in the day, you could have gotten a VHS tape of Versailles or whatever, but like the internet's made this so easy,
So
right?
easy. And I remember when early on, when I was researching for magazine articles and things, that you would have the guide to periodicals, which was
Mhm.
a collection of books. You had to go to the library and then you go and see if your subject was in it and if there were magazine articles. And then you would hope the library would have those magazines so that you could go and look at them.
And you could request sometimes copies of articles.
Mhm.
You think about just that the ease in which we can find the things we need to find.
Yeah.
And then you can, ascertain how accurate it is,
Right.
by looking at
Right.
the source and whatever, just like you would with anything.
Oh, yeah,
But-
yeah, you do have to check, you have to check the sources.
Yeah.
I love Wikipedia, but I
Mhm.
don't assume Wikipedia is correct.
Right.
And I look at the sources at the bottom. I look for other sources that were corroborated.
Right. So you got to try to go to the primary source when
If
they
I
have
can
like
go
the
that,
footnotes at the
right.
bottom. Yeah.
Or go to Britannica online or go to
Mhm.
other,
Yeah.
sources.
That
But
makes
yeah.
sense. Yeah. I bet when you were growing up, did you have a set of encyclopedias in your house?
We did. We
I
did.
love encyclopedias.
My dad, and I don't know when he bought them, maybe before I was born. And he had a set of encyclopedias, and I remember the case we kept them in.
Mhm.
And I don't think he had the yearly updates, so our information was pretty outdated. But we used it, and then the library had more updated stuff if I needed something more current.
Yeah.
We bought
Did
them.
you grow up in Madison?
No, I grew up in the UP.
Oh, okay.
Escanaba.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so you didn't have access to like the big central library in Madison.
No, we had a Carnegie library.
Yes.
And wonderful old building.
Yep.
That it no longer houses the library, but has been used for other purposes.
And I bet you spent lots of time at your
Oh, yeah.
library growing up.
Yeah.
It's very special.
Yeah.
We talked about the research in general, like to get the period right, but tell us about the inspiration and your genealogy inspiration for this story.
Yeah, so the inspiration came out of genealogy. I had started researching my family history back in the 70s, when you did have to go to libraries and you had to go to state houses, and we went up to Ottawa, Canada, and it was our honeymoon, and I left Mark alone and I went in and was researching and trying to find out my family history and stuff. So, and I was excited because I came away with little cards with some names and dates that went back a couple hundred
Love it.
years. Then of course, once the kids came along and I was teaching and doing other things, that all went by the wayside. And somehow back in about 20, I think I said 1917 earlier, 2017.
No, we knew you meant like,
yeah.
we knew you meant 20. We knew.
I've been writing this book for 100 years.
It only feels like it sometimes, right?
So I don't know, 2017, 2016, around there. We were visiting with my brother and happened to mention about an ancestor and how things were different online. And I looked him up and said, oh, look, here's some information. Oh, look, here's some more information. Oh my gosh. And I got back into it and just started deeply researching my family history. I did a little bit of my husband's. And probably 3/4 of my ancestry, both on my mother and my father's side, is French Canadian. And a friend of mine, and this was in 2015, I remember, because we were out in San Diego, and while my husband was at conference, I was on the phone with a girlfriend, and she says, oh yeah, have you heard of the Filles du Roi? I found out I'm descended from them. And I said, well, I have heard of them. And what I had been told a long time before that was that these were cast off mistresses of King Louis XIV who were sent to Canada so he could get rid of them. And the guy who told it to me said, oh, and you should write a book about them. So for years and years, I was trying to figure out how to create a story around cast-off mistresses of the king who got sent to Canada. Well, it's a good thing I never did because that's not what they were. And I've since discovered that the filles du roi, they're called daughters of the king because Louis XIV wanted his own colony in Canada. The British had their growing colony in the New England states, and the Spanish had colonies, and he wanted his own, and all he had were the fur trappers and his soldiers and a few itinerant farmers. And there were a few little families that had come and gone. And so he started a program in 1663 that ran for 10 years. And he recruited young women between 15 and 25. And he said, if you will go to Canada and marry my soldiers, marry my fur trappers, marry whatever eligible men are there, I'll pay your passage. I'll give you money for your dowry. I'll give you a trousseau, and I'll pay you if you have babies. And in that 10-year period, about 750 or so women took him up on this plan. And they went over there. And then it was like speed dating. They got to choose their husband. So that'll show up in the second book.
I cannot
really
wait for that scene.
They got to choose their husband. And that never happened in Europe. And so Quebec grew and Montreal grew. And well, it turned out I am descendant from, at last count, I think 21 of these women who came over.
Wow.
And one of them I discovered is the matrilineal. So it's my mother's mother's mother, all the way back about 8 generations to the woman who came over. That comes down through all the women. And that's kind of fun for me.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of work too. Like, how hard was it to actually do all that genius? I mean, was it online? Could you find most of that online?
Oh, it's all online.
It is.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's all online. So the hard thing was, once I had the names of my ancestors, and I figured out that these women were my 7th and 8th great grandmothers, then I have to go in and match the names to the lists of the filles du roi. But if you count back, so you have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great grands, 16. By the time you get to the 10th level,
Yeah. How many is that?
4,000 people who have come together. And then half of those, 2,000, are women.
Right.
So, but this is a generation, 2 generations below that.
Okay.
So that's the 10th level. So 2 generations below. So there's a lot of women. And I haven't found obviously all of them.
Mhm.
Some will never
Sure.
get found. And then just figuring out which ones came over already married, which ones came over under a different reason. And a lot of people in groups I belong to, they may find 70, 80 ancestors who are part of these women. But I'm pretty excited even to have found 20.
Well, and that would make some sense, right? Because they didn't leave the area, they stayed in the area, and then they, they're marrying within,
Right.
and so you've got, these generations coming together,
Yeah.
like, oh, like,
Yeah.
the mom of the,
Yeah.
husband is also,
Right.
whatever, so.
Right. And in Canada, in French speaking Canada, everybody is descendant from them. I mean, it's sort of like being a descendant of the Mayflower, except the Mayflower was maybe 150 people.
Yeah.
So this is a larger group. And it was also a very inbred group because it was a small group. It was Catholic and they weren't allowed to marry outside the church. So they married their cousins and their second cousins. And
Well, was it predominantly, I mean, wouldn't Quebec have been predominantly Catholic?
it was at the time
Yeah.
required to be Catholic.
Okay, so it would be later generations that were like other, like Protestant or other,
Yeah.
as,
Well, some of the Huguenots went over
okay, right.
but it was hard for them. I mean, if you weren't Catholic, life was made very difficult.
Yeah, you didn't fit in.
The advantage to being Catholic and to being sponsored by Louis XIV was they kept wonderful records. There are baptismal records, there are burial records, there are records of property deeds and wills and who went to visit who and who did this and that.
Yeah,
So,
isn't that funny?
yeah.
But, so you have the treasure trove.
Yeah. Yeah, there's lots and lots of information back then. However, my character. So my big question was, what would cause a young woman to have to want to leave France
Right. And her family.
and her family and
Yeah.
everything she knew
Yep.
and cross the ocean? And so I invented Sylvienne. She is not like any of my ancestors. I did have her come from a community that my ancestors came from, Amiens, France. And so that was fun investigating what that community was like. So things like if you read the book and in the big cathedral there's a little room with supposedly the skull of St. John the Baptist, in case that's really there. Now, I've also heard there's one in 3 other cathedrals around here.
So.
But what she saw in the book really is there. And so I invented this girl and I gave her a larger than life sort of experience and made her very unlike my ancestors. In book 2, her experiences will be very close to what my ancestors experienced.
So I mean, obviously we know at the end of the book that has she left or does she just know she's leaving at the end of the book?
She gets on the ship.
She's on the ship.
She's on the ship.
And so do we pick up on the ship with the second? Right on the
Yep.
ship.
Oh yeah, the voyage was a story in and of itself.
Well, and even that, to write the research, what were those ships like? You
Yeah.
know, what would her accommodations have been like?
Yeah.
How many days would it take to sail? I mean, I would never be off the internet. I would just
Oh.
be like sucked in forever.
And to think about these people and these women going over, I mean,
The unknown.
and not everybody who sailed survived. There were deaths on every ship.
I'm
so.
sure. Wow. How long did it take?
Anywhere from like maybe 5 to 8 weeks.
Oh, can you imagine? Oh,
Could take longer if the winds were wrong, if there were storms.
yeah.
I don't know if they got over maybe 4 weeks if they were lucky.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait for the next one. That one's going to be called Tangled Dawn. Tangled Dawn.
That's tentative.
Okay.
So I'm
I understand
figuring
that.
it out.
I understand that. Well, I know. And it's
Yeah.
you kind of like, you have to call it something.
Yeah.
So it's like your working title for now. So the intrigue of court life, I mean, that was pretty well described in historical documents.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Somebody even asked me, how do you know all this stuff happened? Oh, it's all.
You should
recorded.
just like deadpan
Yeah.
time travel.
Time
And
travel.
just be like.
That's what it feels like. And, there's a lot of books written about the British nobility. You think about
Oh, sure.
Henry VIII, you think about Queen Elizabeth I. And that was all documented. And Louis XIV, and the Louis that came before him and the ones after him, there were not only records kept in the court,
Mhm.
but there were a lot of local literary gossips.
Okay.
So back then, the newspapers were called gazettes. And they were like our gossip newspapers. Yeah.
Like National Enquirer.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
For the royalty.
And they would report on that and they would sometimes make up stories where they would hide the identity of the person, but everybody knew who they were talking about.
Yeah.
And there were people who wrote a little bit after the fact about the period and the people, but there were women. Madame Sylvienne was a woman. She was at court. She makes a brief appearance in one of the salons in the book, but she would write letters to everybody. She would write. Her daughter had moved on with her husband to wherever her husband was going to be governor of. And they would write letters back and forth. And Madame Sylvienne would tell all the gossip of court. And she knew, she was on the inside. She knew all the gossip. The king's brother, Philippe, his second wife, who was Elizabeth Charlotte, and she went by Liselot, she wrote tons of letters. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have TV. So they read widely, those who were educated. And they wrote and they wrote, and Liselott probably wrote a dozen letters a day to different people. And a lot of those letters are preserved. So, and I remember recently reading, and this is maybe 3-4 years ago, where there was found in Europe, I think in the Netherlands, a cachet, a wooden cachet of letters that had never been opened.
What?
And it was from that very period. And it was, and they're a little afraid to open them for fear that they're gonna all fall apart. So they're trying to have means of figuring out what these letters say without actually opening them.
Like X-ray vision kind of thing.
Yeah, they've got things that can look into that. So,
Oh, that's wild.
yeah.
So what, some postman got like robbed or something, or, like what happened? Like,
it could have been, it could have been. So back then they did have a postal service
Uh-huh.
in France, and it was run by the crown. And you paid when you received the letters.
Oh,
So
interesting. Okay.
chances are you paid somebody to make sure they got there safely. But then if they were delivered to you, you also paid, because that's just how it worked.
Well, I mean, that's quite the mystery too. Like if you, and you think about today, okay, you think about, if we want to go learn about, say, a famous author or something, there's often an archive and there's a repository in a library, and you go, I'm going to go and get access, and you request, and they give you gloves and, whatever, and you can look. But now in this day and age, with all of our digital stuff,
A lot of it's online.
yeah. And then, that's going to be a really interesting thing, like how archives are saved,
Right.
in terms of, like, you think about the treasure of having those letters and
Right.
the envelopes and all the things that can help,
Yeah. And so what I access mostly, so like the letters of Madame Sylvienne,
Mhm.
the letters of Liselott, those have been curated and put into books that are accessible
Right.
at libraries.
Right. So
So,
you could get access to them in a normal way
Oh,
without
yeah,
having to
yeah.
go to a collection.
right.
But then you can really get the feel of
Oh, yeah.
what was going down. But it's just, I love the contrast of her life in her village,
Mhm.
and then like the things she's witnessing,
Yeah.
and the court that she has to get used to,
Right.
or try to act somewhat sophisticated and not be like surprised by or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
But then now we get this, like, I cannot wait for like her story arc,
Right.
because she's going to be now in this new place that's not going to be at all like
Right.
the court.
Right.
So would you view this as a 2-book duology, like, or is it going to be a multi-book series?
Right now, 2 books.
Mhm.
There has been a suggestion, maybe continuing into a third. If I did that, I would probably go with another generation,
That would make sense.
but at the same time I've been writing this book, I have also started writing a mystery novel
Yay,
that
mystery.
takes place at the same time.
Oh, really?
Well,
That's fun.
I wanted to do another mystery novel and do one by myself.
Mhm.
And I tried a couple of ideas and none of them were really gelling, or I'd come up with an idea and, oh yeah, 10 different people have written on that, There's a ton of library mysteries, there's genealogy mysteries, this and that. And then I realized I have all this research, and why let it go to waste? So I created a character who's at the same time frame, but has nothing to do with this book,
Okay.
other than as the time frame. And she's the daughter of an apothecary, who is blinded in an accident. And they live on the island in the middle of the Seine, the Ile de la Cité.
Yeah.
And back then, the island was filled with businesses and how, homes and things like that. And there were apothecaries all over the city. And I've been able to find really cool maps of that island in that time period, where you can kind of go right down the streets and look at where things were. So that's been kind of
That's
fun.
very fun. Are you a Diana Gabaldon fan, an Outlander fan at all?
We started by watching it on TV.
Okay.
And enjoyed the first season tremendously. And watched it as they got into France a little bit.
Yeah, I was curious if you,
Yeah, but then we got distracted. Our thing lately is Vikings.
there you go.
And it
Which
turns
is also very good.
yes. And there's several different Viking series.
Mhm.
And I do have Viking ancestry, and we've discovered my husband is fairly Norwegian, so there must be Vikings there.
There you go.
But I've read her first book, but not as deeply into it. Tracy Chevalier is one I really enjoy.
Oh, yes. Oh, the girl with the pearl earring.
The girl with the pearl earring.
The girl, blue dress.
Um,
Is there a blue dress one? Girl in the blue
There's
dress?
the blue,
There's a tapestry one.
yep, yeah.
Oh God, I love those. Do you guys know what we're talking about? Tracy Chevalier.
She's,
There's such good historical.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I gosh, I
So-
haven't read her in a while.
yeah. So
Are there new ones?
she's got a new one just out. I don't know how historical it is.
Gotta check it out.
I've read a little bit of Geraldine Brooks. I like her.
Okay.
Um, and I enjoy reading nonfiction from the era.
Yes.
And I remember
Yes.
reading, and I can't remember the title, but there was one that had to do with the love-hate relationship between Thomas Jefferson and I think it was John Adams. And you know, what went on during that time period. And I know that and I started reading the love letters between I think it was John Adams and his wife Abby.
Yeah.
Abigail.
Yes. Yes.
So, yeah.
See, and again, we have those because of this, like the letters were preserved.
Right.
I know. I feel like just one bad hard drive, we're like gonna lose some amazing history of, all the interactions that people have had, someone famous. You have a couple really outstanding famous author endorsements. Margaret George.
Yes.
And one of my local favorites, Jennifer Chiaverini, who
Yep.
writes the Elm Creek,
The Elm Creek quilts.
is it Elm Creek?
But she also does historical.
Yes, she does.
She did.
Yes.
Mrs. Lincoln's dressmaker.
Dressmaker, yes, which is
And
very good.
She did one on, was it, Addie Lovelace, she was the wife of, one of the big poets, but she was
Yeah.
also a mathematician.
Yes.
So yeah.
I just have always been fascinated by her books.
Yeah.
Tell us about, so do you know these two ladies?
Well, I knew Margaret George already.
Okay.
We had connected because she would come to some of the screenwriting organizations that I belonged to.
Mhm.
We got to know each other that way. So when I reached out to her, it was really easy. For as long as I've lived in Madison, I had never met Jennifer Chiaverini.
Yep.
I reached out to her through her publicist
Oh, there you go.
and got an
Yep.
immediate warm response.
Oh,
and
nice.
And we finally met. I went to her book launch last April, I believe it was, for her 25th book.
I know, she's
She
so
made me feel like,
prolific. I know.
oh my
Can you
goodness, I need to
imagine?
start writing more. Yeah.
I just
So-
remember her saying once that if she'd known how successful her Elm Creek quilt books were going to be, she would not have made her protagonist an octogenarian.
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
That made me laugh and made me think.
Right.
She's quite fun
Yeah.
in terms of her approach to writing. Yeah. It looks to me, just checking it out online, that the response to this book has been really satisfying. You have
Yeah.
fabulous quantity of reviews, and your rating, average is
Yeah.
way high, like 4.8 or something like that. So it just has to be so satisfying to know.
It feels great. It
Yeah.
feels great. And then just the little milestones. So I requested that they do a large print edition. So that came out. And then I've been waiting on the audiobook.
Yes.
And the way it works is that my publisher farms it out, the rights to audiobook publishers.
Okay.
And the one he had took their time getting to it. So I was getting really nervous because some of my co-writers with the same company, their audiobooks were coming out. And some of them were able to choose their narrators, most of them not. And I wasn't given a choice. The only thing that was hopeful to me was that they asked, how did I pronounce my maiden name,
Oh.
which is my middle name here.
They didn't mispronounce it like I did. No, they did.
Luckily they asked, and I was able to say, this is how it is.
But that was it? That's all they asked?
That's all
You
they
had so many
asked.
French words. And you've
They
listened,
found somebody who
who
could handle
knew,
it.
who knew
Yeah.
what to do.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
had
like,
recommended, so the two mystery novels are in audiobook,
yeah.
and we found a wonderful, wonderful narrator. And I had contacted her and she said, yeah, she could do French. She'd done some before. And I tried to connect her with my publisher, but it didn't work out for
Mhm.
one reason or another. But I've listened to the beginning pages of the audiobook and I'm very pleased with the narrator they
Good,
chose. So,
good. Well, I mean, and you know, it can go wrong. So, I mean, you can
it
be nervous
can.
about it, especially that's the thing, you know, when you're with a publisher, you start to cede some control and, you know.
Yeah.
So you're like, but I saw your announcement. Was that just this week?
It was.
Yeah. So congrats on that.
Thanks.
You did have to wait a little while for it, but I mean, it's also not a small book. Like how many thousands of words? I mean, is it like, is it 100?
110,000, 118,000.
You know, but it doesn't feel like that big. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like it needed it.
Yeah.
Because we needed the details
Right.
and stuff. So,
Right. And
I
this, originally it was going to be, this in Canada, we're going to be one book. And then it was like, oh, no, I guess not. And then my first draft of this came in at 150,000. And I'm like, oh yeah, no publisher's going to take that. So I'm cutting and cutting and
Well,
cutting.
and you do editing, right?
Yeah,
For other
yeah,
people.
yeah.
But I think it's harder to edit
Oh,
your
yeah.
own work.
Yeah.
Did Christine do editing for you?
She did some, she
Yeah.
did some,
It's helpful to have other, I mean, and you
Right.
guys work, you write
Right.
together, so she knows
Right.
your
And-
style, which can be very helpful.
and Mary Joy, my sister-in-law, has done professional editing.
Right.
She edited.
That's
it.
right. I forget you've got another co-writer in
Yeah.
the family and somebody who knows their
Right.
way around a manuscript.
When did this thing that, you want to publish a book, it has to be not more than X amount of word. When did that start? Because it seems to me, some of these older books, look at that books like from the 70s and
Mhm.
stuff. They're really good. And they were really good books, and they, you know, like the richer books or something.
Mhm.
And did that standard apply back then?
That's a good question. So for you guys online, the question, if you couldn't hear, Pete was asking, when did the norms of word counts in certain, you know, in novels, you know, come to be like our guidelines?
Mhm.
I don't know the answer to that necessarily, like
don't-
when
I don't know specifically, but I know that back in like the 1800s, maybe even early 1900s, a lot of books were published in serials.
True.
So they would put them out in
Yeah.
magazine form,
Mhm.
and then they would collect them into one big book. And then they would make however many copies. One of the issues, the two issues, one is cost.
Yeah.
So my book is a lot more expensive than some other books that my publisher put out because it's more pages.
Right.
It just
And then
physically
we go like-
costs more.
And this is large print,
And
so this
this
is even
is-
more pages.
It is, and it's pricier.
But I mean,
So-
perfect if you've got any eyesight issues.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
it's nice.
Although then it's like, oh, look how heavy it is. You
It's
know,
true.
now-
So you better not have arthritis in your hands and
Don't
eyesight
read
issues.
it while you're sleeping and have it fall asleep on you.
Actually, I've actually hit myself in the face with my Kindle.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, and then the other thing is attention span.
Mhm.
You know, the attention span of readers has changed. And the
That's
way
true.
that, not only the length of a book, but the length of chapters, the
Mhm.
length of paragraphs. You know, if you look at the old Henry James books,
Oh my gosh, the blocks of text,
Oh,
right?
a paragraph could go on for a page and a half. You know, now if your paragraph has more than several sentences, people get impatient with you. So I think it's a combination of things,
Mhm.
but the economics of it and then the attention span of the reader are the two biggest things.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, lately, so I write more in the children's market, so YA and middle grade. A lot of that has to do with those sort of things, like what is going to be marketable.
Yep.
What's acceptable, you know, for that age group in terms of what they'll keep going
Right.
on, you know, what isn't going to turn them off. What grade did you teach?
Mostly kindergarten and first grade
Okay, so just the very beginnings of reading. So
and of writing.
yeah,
I
yeah.
taught writing back in kindergarten and first grade.
that's
And
right.
what I tried to do was to get children not to be afraid of writing
Right.
and to enjoy it. So I would structure it when I taught first grade, we'd have our writing class at the end of the day. And, you know, when the kids are like, oh, they're done with formal learning, but they'll sit down with a friend and work on a story.
Yes.
And I'm a collaborative writer, so it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna make these kids.
Oh, that's so
sit and-
fun.
write in isolation. So
I'm just curious, and this has nothing to do with book topics. So did you let the kids then like do all their own inventive spelling just to get the story down?
oh yeah,
I just love reading those stories where all the
Yeah.
words are all spelled all wonky, but you know what they mean. I just think it's the
Right.
best thing ever.
and I'm also a believer for kids in a lot of first drafts.
Yes.
You know, we did
Yes.
writing that we took and edited and moved and got it to where we would publish it in class.
Yes.
But journal writing and first drafts, I think, are really important for little
Well, right,
kids.
just to get kids to like have understand they can do it.
Yep.
And then have some affection for
Right,
it too.
right.
Well, that's super fun.
Yeah.
That's like, those are good grades to teach.
Yeah, it was fun.
Sometimes when I did like high school school visits, or if I have a combo day and you do middle school like in the morning and high school in the afternoon, the middle schoolers are like enthusiastic and they all want to share what they wrote, most of them.
Yeah.
And they're like, no, my turn, you know, they want to like, you know, you could do a writing prompt. You get to high school in the afternoon and maybe it's the afternoon, I don't know. They're always like, they've got their phones, you know, and no, they don't. And I would have to try to challenge them, but at times they'd say, well, okay, you know, can I write with my friend? And I would be like, yes, anything, just do something. Like, and it was fun to see what came out of that then,
And-
you know, with the partner writing.
Some surprisingly deep things. out of
Yes.
High schoolers.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's in there.
Yeah.
And it's such a good way to express all the things that can be going on in
Yeah.
kids' lives. So, that's very fun to know that's the grade you taught. More questions from anybody? No?
And maybe a question, but when you were talking about the births, and then you were talking about the queen having to give birth in front, is that actually true?
Yes.
Oh my.
Yeah, they had to give birth so yes,
Like,
you give birth in front of an audience.
Because that's how they knew
It was,
that, that,
but it said, yeah,
it was actually the
but I was
first
just like,
baby.
I had never heard that.
Yeah. Yeah.
isn't that atrocious?
And that,
Well, yeah, considering they walk around and they're so prim and proper and don't.
yeah.
You
Yeah.
give birth and everybody can watch.
Yes, it's a
And that-
sightseeing.
That wasn't just France. I mean, England did that, you know, anywhere that they had monarchy where they had.
Yeah, and if the Catherine the Great, the spoofy one that Ellie Fanning is in,
Mhm.
if that is true, there's a whole episode of that where she's like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, because it's kind of a sarcastic.
Yeah.
Catherine. I don't know if you've
Right.
seen that on Hulu.
I don't know if we've seen that one
Yeah,
yet.
it's funny, but yeah, there's a whole scene where she's like, "And you're all gonna watch."
And you turned off all the people that I wanted to kill off, so I was really glad about that.
Oh, good.
If you can't hear online, somebody is saying they're glad that she killed off who she killed off.
Yeah.
Well done, you. Yay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Did you have a question?
Could you tell us something about your other two mysteries?
Sure, sure. So these two books, the first one is On the Road to Death's Door, and it features a retired couple, the woman is a retired small town police officer from the UP. And her husband is a retired history college professor. And they inherit an RV. And they hit the road in their RV. And so the first one takes them, it's like their maiden voyage. They go to Door County. And first bodies start to drop there. And
They do that a lot. Patricia Skulka finds bodies.
Oh, yeah.
All these authors are finding.
Oh, yeah. Well, and Mary Jo and I spent a week up there and scouting out places to hide the dead bodies.
That is
and
Somebody's like, "What are you gals doing?" We're like, yeah, we're looking.
oh, yeah, yeah, mystery writers. If the government, if the government ever looks at the Google search of mystery writers,
Oh, we'd all be in big
all in
trouble.
trouble. And so the other one takes the same couple and they go to Boston in their RV, where you don't want to be in an RV. They
I can
mean
imagine
to go
driving
to
in a car.
to a campground nearby, but they hit the wrong exit and they end up right in the city. And they end up on Storrow Drive where all the bridges are too low. And there's signs, you know, trucks and buses are not
They're
allowed there.
stuck.
And I had seen online a news brief of an RV, that's where I got the idea for the book, where they ended up on Storrow Drive and had to bump up over the median to get to the other side to go back the other way. So I have that in this book. And this one, they end up at like the Old North Church
Mhm.
and going on the Freedom Trail and things like that. And I spent a lot of time in Boston, in the, like, between, 2000, but particularly around 2015.
Mhm.
I was going back and forth to Boston a lot, so it just seemed like a good place to
They're-
put mystery.
These are they're delightful mysteries. They're just very, very well done.
Thank you.
So the third one will be in the Apostle Island.
Yes, it's partially written. It got sidetracked when I started working on the solo novel, but
Totally
But yeah.
understand. I totally understand.
and it turns out you can take an RV on that ferry
Oh, you
over
can.
to Madeline Island.
Oh, yeah. So we will get to ride along with that RV to Madeline Island in the book.
Yeah, it's a short ride, and hopefully your engine doesn't die like theirs does, but yeah.
Is your sister-in-law writing other things too? Has she gotten sidetracked with her own projects as
She
well, or-
got sidetracked because she's a master quilter,
Oh,
and
okay.
quilting is her art craft.
Yes.
And my house is filled with her quilts.
Well, that is a beautiful thing
and
to be able to do.
So she enjoys writing when we do it together,
Mhm.
but she would prefer to quilt over anything.
Over writing. Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah. That's wonderful though. I'm not a sewer, so when anybody can do
No,
the
I'm not.
beautiful quilting like that, I'm
Yeah.
just in awe of how
Yeah.
beautiful that can be. So we want you to just have more than 24 hours in a day because we just want these books.
Sure.
So yeah, so I'm gonna sprinkle some
Yes.
writing magic
Yes.
where we can do like
Yeah.
double writing or
Yeah.
something. So do you have an anticipation like sometime in 2025 for the second book, do you think?
That's my hope.
Okay. More questions before we wrap up?
I think historical history, it's kind of serve a couple of purposes, besides just being a good book and interesting. But it will also can fill in the gaps that we don't know. And you can say that, I don't know what happened then, but it could have happened this way. And that's kind of important, putting the big puzzle together, going from A to B.
Yeah.
How did we get there? Well, we don't know what happened here, but here's the good theory.
Right.
And it's always a good focus.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and if you've done your research, well, like all the things that you're doing with that, where you don't have an exact, like a for sure moment in history, you're using all your sensibilities from all your research to like he says, to do it justice. So that makes sense.
And the hardest thing is to take historical reality and make it fit the time frame of your story. So sometimes an author will have to take literary license.
Right.
And I put it into my author's notes where I veered from history.
Right. Where you had to make a decision. You're like, oh, I mean, sometimes you probably think, oh, is this going to fit? Is this
Yeah.
going to fit? And then you go back to your notes and you're like, oh, I'm off by like 2 years or
Yeah.
something like that, in terms of
And
an event.
maybe the average reader won't notice it, but there will be somebody.
Oh, there
out
will.
Who will
You-
notice it.
You've
and
got to
take
put it in
issue
your
with it.
notes. You're right. You're smart to do it because you
Yeah.
can say, well, I did. Yeah. Yes, I did do that purposefully. And
Right.
as you can see on page, whatever.
Right.
There will be somebody always who will point that out.
So, when we Apostle Island, that's really when it comes out, we will set it up.
Oh, I will certainly have you back for that one.
Yeah, that'd be
But
great.
so the question was about the Apostle Islands mystery and whether we're going to get to discuss it here. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So I work really well under deadline. Maybe put me on the calendar.
No. Well, I have openings starting in August, a year from now. So
Let's see.
wait, there's an opening in May.
That's a little.
That's too soon. I know that's too soon. That's too soon. But yes, we could do that. We could pick a fall date next year.
Well,
Nah, I don't know. That's too much pressure. You got this thing going on.
I've got 2 other books I gotta finish first.
Let me leave a couple gaps in there. We'll just see what happens. How's
Okay.
that? All
Well,
right,
this
we'll
will
leave
be
a
a good
window. We'll leave a
motivation
window open.
This will be a good motivation.
So thank you so much, Peggy. We appreciate you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.